So here we are, the beginning of, I guess, the third month. Yesterday was number 60. So each of the months is beginning and or completing, and the threshold is the 13th day of the month. So yesterday was April the 13th, that was number 60. Today is the 14th, and we're up to number 61. Now, I just finished up with a 2-hour discussion with my colleague and very good friend, Stacy Smith, over at the Black Cat Cafe on Stevens Avenue here in Portland, Maine, where I'm proud to say I've invented a drink called El Dominicano, which is a small, single espresso and a small hot chocolate side by side. I'll put a photograph of it on this entry. I'll include that in the things that I post, just to commemorate that. Anyway, we just had a really good 2-hour discussion on the Bhagavad Gita, which we meet to discuss. And we, when we sat down to discuss it, I told her that, just yesterday, and Stacy actually is one of the few folks that is sort of keeping up with this work in terms of reading the posts. So I really appreciate her doing that. We've been working together and for a while now, going well over 14 years. Anyway, in the 7th book of the Gita, lines 12 have a sort of uncanny resonance with what I was talking about yesterday, when I was talking about the continuing discussion of the truth of concealment, and this sort of preparation that's going on in the cave. And as I've talked about, the truth of concealment as one part of being, as being, it sort of arrives into our understanding. So when I was writing after the fact, when I was doing my post-recording write-up, I often, summarize what I've talked about. And when I was talking about this part-to-whole relationship, truth of concealment, truth of disclosure, I actually talked about it as 3 different parts. The truth of disclosure, which is the presenting or the presencing, the offering made to us, right, as humans, in the form of our freedom, potential freedom to do something. The truth of concealment, which is all that remains outside of that presencing, but it's also what is present but not yet disclosed. So the future as well is in the held within the truth of concealment. So there's the present absent, and then there's the future absent, right? So then those would be like the 3 fundamental sort of parts, I was saying, of being as it sort of happens for us. So I thought it was really sort of resonant with that point, lines 12 and 13 of the Gita from chapter 7, which is the following. And this is Krishna, right, is speaking, and the voice of Krishna says, "And know that the 3 Gunas, forms, the 3 states of the soul, come from me. Peaceful light, restless life, and lifeless darkness. But I am not in them, they are in me." So in a way, there's this very interesting resonance, right, where the voice of Krishna, you could say, is the voice of being. And the voice of being is speaking about these 3 different modalities of being, or what I'm calling the sort of realities of these different realities, these different truths, these 3 fundamental truths. The state of peaceful light, which would be the truth of disclosure. Restless life, well, I don't know that that necessarily corresponds to absent present. It's more of like a certain sense of um, chaos, and then lifeless darkness. Now, what Stacy told me is that these are better understood as motion, wisdom, and the inert. There's some resonance, but I didn't say explicit, sort of clear symmetry. So I thought that was interesting. And then the other thing, though, is that Krishna then goes on to say how the whole world is under the delusion of these shadows of the soul, and knows not me, though forever I am. So I thought that was sort of resonant as well. That first of all, obviously the language of the shadows, but to live within that sort of human reality exclusively, and not to make the move towards being. Now, that's a whole nother discussion I don't want to necessarily get into, because for me, it would be too strong to say that our response or our taking up of those different modalities of the truth of concealment, well, the two modalities of the truth of concealment and the truth of disclosure, but then the truth of concealment sort of has these two moments of present absent and future absence. So there is a kind of a three thing going on there. To call that to live under delusion, it's too strong for me, and that's where I would depart with that, insofar as that it's the human reality, right? And then to create a sort of hierarchy where we're saying that, that being stands not simply apart from, right? So that's the ontological difference between being and beings, between being and human beings, between existence and human existence. But that in some way human existence or being is more real or somehow of a higher value. I don't want to make that move because there are a number of reasons. One of them, just straight to not to take up too much time, is simply because to make that move is to it's to, in a way, I suppose, I don't want to say dishonor or discredit, but it leaves the human experience, our worldly experience, almost like unredeemable, right? So I'm more interested in what happens, and maybe this is what the Gita is suggesting is, and this is the point that maybe the voice of Krishna is making, is if you live solely caught up in the human without any sense of the offering that I'm giving you, or that I am present, that you are within me, if you live with the amnesia of that, then you're sort of undirected and sort of unthinkingly moving about. So in that sense, I would say, yeah, I'm open to that notion that the whole point is that we're moved by the offering of being. This has been a principal point I'm making. But the traditions, or any tradition that would say that the point is to transcend human reality and to sort of ascetically abandon or detach ourselves from the human reality, that becomes otherworldly in the sense that I don't want to sort of advocate for that. I'm interested in how our participation in the world and our embodiment and our bringing into the world a sense of curation and preservation, and a sense of our desire to as Arendt says, renew and repair the world. And so there's a certain directedness that our freedom is taking, right? It's an intention towards sustainability and so forth. This is what I'm mostly interested in. So that's sort of guided by, if you will, the permanence of being, and its constant becoming, our participation in that. That's what Heidegger, I think, calls being the shepherd of being, as opposed to just doing things in this way that humans are only regarding themselves, which, sort of the essence of capitalism, right, where we just make stuff and buy and sell stuff and take everything from the earth as if it was made for them. Okay. All right, I'm going to move forward because I ended up talking more about the Gita than I did so far anything having to do with being and learning, but that's okay. That's where I was today. on this day that's actually what do they call it, a blood moon or a full moon, because it's not only a full moon, but it's also a total eclipse, lunar eclipse. So the moon is going to appear in an orangey, pinkish, reddish hue this evening. Onward. So what was written this date, April the 14th, 2004. So I concluded with some questions, and then I pick it up. So let me go back to how we concluded yesterday. The more sheltered, the more one is prepared to emerge as apprentice. But how does the appearance appear in the cave? How does the not yet emerge in the cave? How can we account for the other side of the twofold play? Responding, and this is how I begin today. Responding to this question returns us to the question concerning the identity of the performers. For it is they, the teachers, who alone are capable of and responsible for recognizing the not yet that is always already retained by the prisoners. It is thus in the prisoners' status as prisoners, in their bondage, that we identify the not yet, and thus to understand the identity of the captors as participants in the educational process, we must identify their performance as a preparation that preconserves the capacity for learning. The truth of appearance appears in the cave as the most essential not yet. It appears in hiding as most concealed. The truth of appearance first appears with the most essential form of the truth of concealment. As the two moments of the twofold play, appearance and concealment are conjoined as two opposites that must be thought together, as Heraclitus or Lao Tzu would remind us. The truth of being, the way it appears to us, is identified in the unity of these two opposites. When we grasp the meaning of the twofold play as a conjoinment of these two phenomena, we understand why the quality of each moment defines the other. They coexist reciprocally. The twofold play is thus a process of reciprocal exchange and unincorporated association. To be incorporated is to be united or combined into one body. And association denotes, quote, an organization with a common purpose, friendship, companionship, living together, and having a uniform and distinctive aspect. To identify the twofold play as a reciprocal exchange is to recognize the two moments as distinct yet together in a common purpose. To stress the two moments as being unincorporated is to emphasize the manifold nature of being's processual unfolding. As Heidegger suggests, this most ancient understanding of being and truth was gradually forgotten, and over time the stress was laid emphatically by science on the side of appearance. Concealment was concealed, but not in the essential way of concealment, for it was forgotten and thereby eclipsed. But the twofold is likened to an eclipse, where the brilliance of the sun is momentarily shaded by the moon, yet retained on the rims and made visible and attentive and perceptive. When we identify the twofold play as a reciprocal exchange, we also identify the manner of the relation between appearance and concealment. A reciprocal exchange is a relation based on reciprocation, quote, a mutual giving and receiving, unquote, from the dictionary. The twofold play is the essence of the offering and receiving we have identified as the heart of learning, and this is why we have located learning within being, as an expression of being, as the manifestation of the truth of being. This is the link Heidegger has drawn us to explore in the allegory, the connection between the essence of education and the truth of being. To reciprocate is, quote, to give, feel, etc. in return, to give and receive reciprocally, to cause to move alternatively backward and forward, while reciprocation is, quote, an act or instance of reciprocating, the state of being reciprocal, unquote. We call attention to the being of reciprocity in order to identify the sense in which the quality of the twofold play is determined mutually by the manner of each side, yet this determination remains undetermined and in flux. This flux allows for one side of the twofold play to retain its difference, its distinction, The flux is the essence of the play of the two that reciprocates. The giving and receiving retains the distinction of the two. They remain unincorporated, two, not one. Thus the twofold play is a reciprocal exchange. But the reciprocal character of the exchange suggests that the twofold play offers another aspect wherein the one side can and must retain its distinction. This holding back or standing apart has been characterized as alterity, the otherness of the other. If the relational modality we have identified in being and learning is legitimately beckoned at this moment, then it arrives to inform us that the reception of the alterity of the other must be understood as determining the modality of the receiver. Hence, the reciprocation that unfolds in the twofold play identifies the manner in which each side may cause to move the other alternatively. Put differently, and within the context of the cave, the offering of concealment is received by appearance as the potentiality of possibility. The truth of concealment, the gift offered by the one side, is the essence of the not yet as possibility. This gift is offered in the cage as bondage that prepares the apprentice. And that's where it ends. So I got a little distracted there because I couldn't help at the moment where the first paragraph, second paragraph, full paragraph concludes, where I said, talking about the relationship between being and truth, and the forgetfulness between the truth of concealment. And then I said concealment was concealed, but not in the essential way of concealment, for it was forgotten and thereby eclipsed. But the twofold is likened to an eclipse, where the brilliance of the sun is momentarily shaded by the moon, yet retained on the rims made visible to the attentive and perceptive. So that the eclipse that occurred with with science, that the eclipsing of the truth of concealment, is not this eclipse that I'm saying is what the twofold is like. And then, so the whole point is I got distracted because today is this phenomenal natural occurrence, and so I was just thrown off by that. But so I kind of got distracted as I was reading. Yeah, by that. But so what's happening here then is sort of interesting because it's sort of I'm digging in a little bit deeper with the meaning of this twofold play, right? And then saying, I think for the first time, that the relationship between being and learning isn't, and this goes back to my preliminary comments having to do with Krishna and the voice of being, if you will, as articulated in the Gita, where there's a sense in which the being is the totality that captures everything. So being as the total that from within which learning is happening. I guess with where I'm going now, what I'm trying to suggest is that the ontological difference is really important for me because the sort of totality of existence, whereas it manifests to the human in particular ways, the human being and the human condition is like a sort of general part, you could say, but it's a part, so it's a part and apart from the totality of existence, and that's the ontological difference. And then furthermore, the particularity of the human person is apart from the more general genus, if you will, of the human. So you have being, and then the distinction between being and human being, and then the distinction between human being and the particularity of human beings. And so that there's this sort of these differences all along the way. And my point is that these aren't part to whole in the way that, you know, you have a number that is the common denominator, whatever, 8, let's call it, and so you have 1/8, 2/8, you know, you have, and then within the eighth of the human being, the part of the whole that is human being as opposed to other living beings, then you would divide that eighth into, I don't know, parts, that would then be the parts that are the human beings. I suppose there's a way to make that move, but I want to stress the difference, and that's where I'm going with the reciprocity. Because the only way for there to be reciprocity between being and learning is for there to be this difference, right? So the only way for there to be this mutual exchange would be for there to be a gap between the two. And that's my point, and that's the sort of important shift that's going on, I think, here with the phenomenology that I'm offering and the description I'm offering, as opposed to, for example, just what we heard very briefly from Krishna, from the Gita, talking about everything being within me. In a certain sense, of course, all moments of existence are within existence as a totality. So that at this moment I'm sharing my existence and all that makes me with, some star system or star that is, 100 million light years away, if there is such a distance. I don't know. Excuse my ignorance. But, some vast distance across the universe, at this moment we're coexisting. We're all part of existence. And obviously we're fundamentally different from one another, but all participating simultaneously in this, the totality of existence. Yet, I remain apart from that totality, and that's the point. And the apartness, not just being apart, but the apartness of the totality is something I'm emphasizing because it has to be there in order for each individual to undertake learning. So learning and being have this relationship that is marked by difference. That's the point I'm trying to make. And that's where I'm going to leave it on this day, 14th of April, 2014, 10 years after the writing from April 14th, 2004, on this day where there is a total eclipse of a full moon.